All right, let's get right into it. For centuries, whales have just been a source of total wonder. I mean, these absolutely colossal, intelligent giants navigating the huge, vast emptiness of our oceans. But our relationship with them, well, it's a really complex story, one of both deep respect and, frankly, relentless pursuit. Today, we're going to trace that history, from their ancient origins all the way to the global industry they fueled, and finally, the desperate race to save them.
I mean, just look at this. This is a sperm whale, right in its element. When you see a creature with this kind of scale, this kind of power, you get why they've captivated us for so long. They're like living mountains, perfectly built for a world that's so different from ours. But that majesty, it also held immense value.
And that really brings us to the core question of this whole story. How did these incredible animals become the engine of a global economy? What made them, for a good chunk of history, the most valuable resource on the planet, even more precious than gold? To figure that out, we have to go back, way back, to understand what they even are. Because here's the crazy thing. Their story didn't begin in the ocean at all. Nope, it started on land, with an evolutionary journey that is just, well, it's nothing short of breathtaking. What you're looking at here is pretty incredible. About 50 million years ago, the ancestor of the modern whale was a four-legged mammal that lived on land. Over millions of years, creatures like this Pachycetus here went back into the water, and their bodies completely transformed for a life at sea. And get this, their closest living relative today isn't a fish or a shark, it's a hippopotamus. Wild, right? So, this long evolutionary road eventually split into two main groups that we still see today, the Mysticeti, which are the baleen whales, and the Odontoceti, the toothed whales. Now, this distinction is absolutely crucial because it didn't just determine what they ate, it completely changed how they were hunted. So on one side, you've got the Mysticeti, like the gigantic blue whale. They're filter feeders. They have these things called baleen plates in their mouths that they use to strain just enormous amounts of tiny krill out of the water. On the other hand, the Odontoceti, they're your active hunters. Think sperm whales, orcas, using their teeth to go after bigger prey like giant squid and fish. Okay, so now that we know what they are, let's turn to history. Because once humanity figured out the unbelievable resources packed inside these animals, an industry was born that would quite literally change the world. This is the Atlantic whaling epic. It really all kicks off in New England. Back in 1659, a group of Quakers settled on this tiny island, Nantucket. And from there, they built a whaling dynasty from scratch. By 1712, their first dedicated whaling ships were on the water. And by the middle of the century, they'd crossed the whole Atlantic, reaching the rich hunting grounds of the Azores. Nantucket became the undisputed capital of the whaling world. And the scale here is just hard to wrap your head around. At its absolute peak, the American whaling fleet had 800 ships. That is a massive armada combing every ocean on the globe for its prize.
And that fleet needed people. We're talking over 70,000 sailors. The guys who owned these ships, these whaling barons from New England, they were the oil tycoons of their day, no question. They controlled a resource that was literally powering and lubricating the entire industrializing world.
So, what was it actually like to be on one of those ships? The hunt itself was this incredibly dramatic, super dangerous, but also highly organized process. And it all started with a single, famous cry.
It all started with a lookout, perched way up high in the crow's nest, who'd spot that telltale spout of a whale on the horizon. Immediately, small, fast whaleboats were lowered into the water. The chase was on. The harpooner's job was to get close enough to make the strike, lodging a hand-thrown harpoon deep into this massive animal. And that just began a brutal battle of endurance, what they called a Nantucket sleigh ride, that could go on for hours before the exhausted giant was finally killed and towed back to the ship.
And this gives you a great idea of both the chaos and the technique involved. On the one side, you've got a diorama that captures that dangerous chase in those tiny boats. And on the other, you can see the specialized tech they were using. All these different types of harpoon heads, each designed to pierce through thick blubber and hold on tight. It was brutal, for sure, but it was effective.
So why? Why go through all this danger? What on earth made the whale so unbelievably valuable? Well, the answer is that you could use pretty much every single part of a whale to make things that were absolutely essential to life in the 19th century. And the number one target was the North Atlantic right whale.
It was right there in the name. It was the right whale to hunt. Why? Well, because it was slow-moving, it was packed with valuable oil, and, this is key, it floated after it was killed, which made it way easier to process. Of course, those same traits that made them perfect for whalers also drove them right to the edge of extinction.
This right here shows a pretty wild connection. On the left, you've got the baleen plates from inside a whale's mouth, and on the right, a 19th century corset. That baleen, it was strong, it was flexible, it was lightweight, it was basically the plastic of its day. It was used for the stays that gave corsets and those big hoop skirts their shape.
But really, the ultimate prize, the holy grail, came from the sperm whale. Inside its huge head was this unique, waxy oil called spermaceti. When you made it into candles, it burned with this bright, clean flame. No smoke, no smell. It was the best lighting fuel in the world, hands down, and it made the sperm whale one of the most hunted animals on the planet.
So when you put it all together, the whale was basically a floating factory. Its oil lit up cities and greased the machines of the Industrial Revolution. Its baleen shaped fashion. Its spermaceti was the premium fuel. Even a rare substance from its gut, ambergris, was worth a fortune as an ingredient in luxury perfumes. The demand just seemed endless.
Now, the age of sail and hand-thrown harpoons was deadly enough, but in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, new technology came along that would push the hunt to an industrial scale and push whale populations right to the breaking point.
This right here, this was the game changer, the explosive-tipped harpoon, invented by a Norwegian guy named Sven Foyn in 1864. It was fired from a cannon on a steam-powered ship, and it could kill a whale almost instantly. This meant that for the first time, whalers could hunt the faster, more powerful whales like the fin whale and the massive blue whale, species that were basically untouchable before.
And the impact was just catastrophic. In the 20th century alone, armed with all this new industrial power, an estimated 2.9 million great whales were killed. It's a number so huge it's almost impossible to even process. And the slaughter really peaked in the 50 years between 1925 and 1975.
So this really puts the timeline of the whole crisis into perspective. It took over 100 years from the invention of that industrial harpoon for the world to finally hit the brakes. With so many species right on the verge of disappearing forever, the International Whaling Commission finally enacted a global moratorium on commercial whaling in 1986, bringing the industrial hunt to an end.
That decision marked a huge shift in our relationship with these animals. Jules Verne wrote, "The sea is an immense desert, where man is never lonely for he feels life stirring on all sides." We came so close to silencing some of the most magnificent life in that ocean. Today, many whale populations are slowly recovering, even though some, like the North Atlantic right whale, are still critically endangered. Their story is just this powerful, sobering reminder of our impact on the planet. And as we watch this fluke just disappear into the mist, it leaves us with a question, doesn't it? Have we really learned what it means to be the stewards of all this great stirring life in our oceans?